Good afternoon and welcome to the Journyx Customer Training webinar, Payroll Rules Engine. My name is Erin McCaffrey and I'll be your host for today's webinar. We know your time is valuable and we hope that you leave today's webinar with useful timesheet knowledge. Just to let you know, you can expand the screen for better viewing using the percent icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. You can submit questions online anytime during the presentation via the Questions tab. I'll be collecting these as the presentation goes forward and reading them at the end during our Q&A time. If we don't get to your question in the Q&A portion, we will take note of your question and answer it following the webinar. Everyone will receive a follow-up email containing a link to these questions and answers, as well as a recording of the webinar. After the webinar, you will have the opportunity to complete a survey. This survey will provide us with feedback that we can use to improve future training webinars. We want to ensure that we're providing you with the knowledge necessary to be successful with Journyx. At this time, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Brian Maxson, Account Executive.
Thanks, Erin, and thank you everybody for taking the time this afternoon to meet with us. What I'm going to try to do is walk you guys through our Payroll Rules Engine module and sort of go through some of the configuration steps, go into a timesheet, look at some sample time, go through the approval process, and then see what the export looks like. As Erin mentioned at the end, we're going to have some time for question and answer. That's where Erin will read off, again, your questions that you submit through the Questions tab, and I'll attempt to answer those for you. And then, again, at the very end, we'll show my contact information, which I'm sure most of you guys have anyway, in case we're not able to answer any of your questions during the actual length of time. Probably shouldn't take more than maybe 15, 20 minutes or so. All right, with that in mind, I'm going to actually go ahead and jump into the application. And basically, the Payroll Rules Engine is a module that we have that is used to be able to create export files out for your payroll system, so that instead of having to do data entry into that system, you can create this export file, go into your payroll system, and import that file in. I'm going to log in as an administrator, and we can take a look at some of these settings. Originally, this Payroll Rules Engine was built for exporting data to ADP. But over the years, we've added to that list to accommodate a bunch of different payroll systems. Probably the most commonly used ones are still ADP and Paychex. But again, over the years, we've added to our list. And basically, it's just so that the export is formatted in the correct format for that particular payroll system. All right, so I am attempting to log in as an administrator here. Hopefully it'll cooperate with me. As we are considering the payroll exports, the biggest thing to take into consideration is a concept of what we call a pay group. And a pay group basically designates what type of payroll rules that somebody should have associated with them. Whether they might be, an example might be an hourly employee versus like a salaried employee. And what we'll do is we will actually break those people out person by person into different pay groups, depending on what sort of overtime rules and things like that that should apply to them. The demo site here is moving really slowly, so I have to thank you for your patience. That pay group field can be created in this custom fields section, just like any other user custom field. And then if I go take a look at some of our users here, for example, I only have 3 people in this particular database, myself, Erin, and Whitney. I'll compare and modify them. You can see that I've got myself and Erin in an hourly pay group. And I've got Whitney in a salaried pay group here. So basically what you do is you create the pay groups, you assign people to the appropriate pay group, and depending on what the payroll rules are, it's going to factor them into that when you're doing your export. From the actual configuration and setup of this tool, It's in this Tools Export section called Payroll Data. And I won't spend a ton of time here, but I'll just give you an overview. Basically what you've got is you've got a master configuration of the Payroll Rules Engine in this one section, and then you can go up and set your different pay groups up to meet your specific rule. So I'll click on this configuration settings first. And as I mentioned, there's several different drop-down or payroll export formats that we've got available that we've done over the years. And assuming that your payroll system doesn't have some sort of way out there formats or really over-the-top complicated rules, we probably can incorporate your payroll system into this Payroll Rules Engine pretty simply. What this is doing, though, is allows you to pick what export format, and then you can dictate which fields. For example, this employee number field is what ADP uses to match that employee in Journyx with that employee in ADP. And this is just a user custom field. So if the one for paychecks was different or CompuPay was different, you would just pick the particular fields. And so you just go through here and pick your particular settings that make sense. This is actually something we would go through and work with you to help set this up to make this work correctly. But there's a bunch of different settings. The thing I wanted to point out to you is just you can pick from this drop-down menu what payroll system that you're using. Once that's done, you can then come into each individual pay group and pick the different overtime settings. So how long is this period? Is it weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, or a manual process? You pick the start date for that particular pay group. You have the option to send over approved time or all time. All time, exception time, non-regular time. So there's different settings that you can have. And then we basically have come up with just about any sort of overtime rule that's out there, including people in California, which have a little bit different overtime rules than most of the United States, actually. In this case, I'm going to keep it real simple, just a 40-hour, 8-hour day, 40-hour week overtime period. And I'll just modify and save this pay group. So again, at a high level, you create a pay group, custom field, you assign each user to that particular pay group. You do some basic setup and configuration within the Payroll Rules Engine itself, and then you modify each pay group to accommodate the particular rules that employee falls into. Once you've got that done, I'm actually going to log out as this administrator and just log in as a user, just so we can take a look at this particular example I've got set up. I've set myself up again into that hourly pay group, and so what I want to be able to show is some overtime. And so for that particular case, I've tracked 9 hours each day, which was going to give me a total of 45 hours. So based upon my overtime rule that I've got assigned to myself, I should expect to see 40 hours of regular and 5 hours of overtime. Well, I'm going to go ahead and submit this for approval. And I'm going to log back in as that administrator. In my pay group settings, I asked it to only show approved time. So I've got my one timesheet I just submitted for approval. I'm going to go ahead and approve that so that it picks that up with the payroll export. Now if I go in and go through my tools and export menu and go to my payroll data, you can see here's my different pay groups that I've got. Since I don't have a lot of people, I'm going to go ahead and pick both pay groups and preview them both at the same time. You can see here's my particular week that I set up on my settings. I'll pick both of those, and I can preview it first. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me a preview of what this payroll is going to look like. Again, this particular one is formatted for ADP. So for example, you can see I've got the employee's full name here. This file number is their employee number, which is the identifying field for that person for ADP. But you can see, for example, here's myself. I've got 40 hours regular, 5 hours overtime. Erin was also hourly, but she's got 32 hours of regular time, 8 hours of sick time. So you can see the hours 3 code for ADP is S for sick. And in Whitney's case, she's salaried, but it's passing over vacation time. So I've got the hours code of V with 40 hours of vacation time. So once I preview that, If I have to go back and make any corrections, I don't want to do that at that particular point in time. And what I can do then is come back to my payroll data, and I'll just pick the hourly in this particular case. Instead of previewing it, I can export it. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a text field in the particular format that that payroll system likes to accept. So at that point, what you could do is basically save that file and then import it into, in this particular case, what would be ADP. Just like that. And so at a high level, that is how our payroll rules engine works within Journyx. As sort of an overview, what you can do is put people into different pay groups. You would come in then to the payroll data section and configure your settings for the payroll rules engine, then configure the different rules for each one of your different pay groups. People would be assigned to those pay groups, so as they track their time in the system, it automatically calculates their time based on what rules they fall into, as far as overtime, sick time, vacation time. Once that time is collected, you can either have that only go through if it's been approved, or all time to go through at any time. And when you go to process payroll, you would just go pick your particular pay group, and you can preview it first, and then you can export it in the appropriate file format. Do we have any questions in the questions panel, Erin?
At this time, we do not have any questions.
Okay. At this point, that really is the high-level overview that I wanted to give you guys about the payroll rules engine. If you do have additional questions, feel free to, I guess, just contact me directly, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. As Erin mentioned, we'll send you guys a recording of this webinar via email, so you can look at it at any point in time. And we might do a follow-up with you guys with some additional information on this tool as well.
Brian, if you don't mind just putting your contact information up on the screen.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Erin.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us today. We hope that you gained useful knowledge from this training webinar. We will be hosting a new training webinar on the second Wednesday of each month at 2:00 p.m. Central Time. And we actually did just have a question come in, Brian, if you have a minute to answer that. Stacy asked, how does the payroll get to ADP?
Okay, so the payroll would get to ADP. So whenever I went in there and I created that that file that looks like this, basically what you would do is just save this somewhere, like your desktop or some, payroll folder on the network you save somewhere, and then you should be able to go into your payroll system in ADP and actually upload the file from ADP, and it would actually upload all of this information via an import into ADP as opposed to manually keying that data into that system now. And that would work the same way whether it's ADP or Paychex or Paycom or whatever payroll system that you use. Almost all the ones that I've seen so far over the 12 years have that import type process.
Okay, we do have another question from Stacy as well. She's asked, can we set pay periods the 1st through the 15th and the 16th to the 31st semi-monthly?
You can. For example, I will go into my hourly pay group here, and these pay periods can be different. You could have a different period for your hourly employees versus your salaried employees, for example. But as I'm setting this up by pay group, one of the settings is, do I want this to be by week, or by 2 weeks, which is biweekly, or by half month, which would be that 1st to the 15th and 16th through the end of the month type setting.
Okay, well, I don't see any more questions coming in. So if you do have any additional questions, please contact Brian at maxon@journyx.com. Thank you again for joining us today. You can visit the Journyx user community at community.journyx.com, and in the training section, you will find all of our upcoming webinars as well as the recorded webinars. You will also receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email. There will be a survey available for you to fill out at the end of the webinar. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Again, thanks for joining us and have a great day.